and welcome everyone to the May Homeless Services Task Force meeting. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to be here. Why don't we just go around? We'll just do quick introductions. I'll call on everybody and then just introduce yourself and tell us what organization you're with in case we have any new individuals on the call with us. So we'll start with David.
David Legier with the South Bay Cities COG.
Great. Grace?
Grace Farwell with the South Bay Cities COG.
Thanks. Lori?
Lori Jacobs with the South Bay Cities COG.
Jackie?
Jackie Backrack, South Bay Cities COG.
Elizabeth?
Hi, Elizabeth Benishai with the LA County Homeless Initiative.
Great. Nancy?
Nancy Wilcox with the South Bay Coalition to End Homelessness.
Thanks. Hi, Janet.
Janet Turner, Congressman Ted Lieu's office. Oh, I'm frozen.
Courtney?
Good afternoon, everybody. Courtney Reed here with PATH, People Assisting the Homeless.
Thanks. Jeff?
Yes, Jeff Newman with Caltrans District 7.
Jackie?
Jackie Arcos with the City of Gardena.
Sherry?
Good afternoon, Sherry Weaver with Harbor Interface Services.
Jeannie?
Hi, Jeannie Naughton, City of Rolling Hills Estates.
Alex?
Alex Montero, council member for City of Hawthorne. Hello, all.
Hello. Landon?
Hi, Landon Phillips with the Hermosa Beach Police Department.
Right. It's El Rami. Sorry, I don't know what your first name is, but
Sorry about that. My first name is Lori Ramey, and I'm with MHALA.
hi, thank you for being here. Mackenzie?
Hi, I'm Mackenzie with the City of Rancho Palos Verdes.
Great. Brianna?
Hi, I'm Brianna Judge Rem with Harbor Interfaith Services.
Great. Marco?
Hello, Marco Limas with El Segundo Police.
Thank you. Roberto? You're muted.
Hi, I'm Roberto Chavez, the HUD Programs Manager with the City of Inglewood. Thank you.
Great. Vaughn?
Good afternoon, Vaughn Norris, City of Hawthorne.
And, congratulations on your new interim position there. John LaRock?
Good afternoon, John LaRock, City of Torrance Community Services.
Okay. George? All right, we'll skip George. We'll go to Moses.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Moses Aglape from Assemblyman Mike Gibson. I'm just an observer and a listener.
Great, thank you for joining us today. Wayne, if you get yourself unmuted, just introduce yourself. Wayne, you want to introduce yourself? All right, well, welcome Wayne Widman, Lieutenant Wayne Widman from the City of Redondo Beach. Let's see, Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Lavin. I'm the Executive Director for the Bakersfield-Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative.
Thank you for joining us today. Lily?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had technical issues joining. Lily Sofiani here with Supervisor Holly Mitchell's office.
Great, thank you for being here. Brittany?
Hello, I'm Brittany Jones. I'm the Associate Director of Government and Community Relations with LASA.
Zulma?
Good afternoon, everybody. Zulma Jen with the City of Torrance City Manager's Office.
George? All right, we'll skip George again. Kimberly?
Kimberly Mack with the City of Hawthorne Housing Agency.
Great. Ronald? All right. And then we have a call-in user. I'm not sure who that is, but thank you everyone for being here. We have meeting notes from March 6th. Unless anybody has read through them that was at the meeting and sees something that should be corrected, I will assume that they are good to go. If you do have something you'd like to bring up related to them, just please raise your hand. Typically, you can find the raise hand underneath the reactions button. All right, seeing none, then we will receive and file those. So let's move on to our first speaker for today. Elizabeth with the homeless initiative for LA County.
Great, thank you so much for having me. I do have some slides that I think one of your staff is going to share for me.
Great, David, are you on that or? Okay.
Great, thank you. So this presentation is about a new tool that our office has developed in partnership with the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. And this is sort of the brainchild of our now former director, Phil Ansell, who recently retired. So I'm going to kind of talk through what the purpose of the tool is and how it works. And then hopefully you can all visit our website where you can kind of play around with it yourself to get a feel for what it really does, since I hope this won't be too abstract. But if we could go to the next slide, please. Just by way of background, I know you're all familiar with the Homeless Initiative, but as a refresher, the Homeless Initiative was established in 2015 by the Board of Supervisors to really develop a comprehensive plan to combat and prevent homelessness, which is what the office did through consultation with a wide range of stakeholders, and ultimately developed 51 strategies to try to address homelessness. But more broadly, the goal of the county and its partners is to end homelessness in the region. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what does it mean to end homelessness? We actually don't use this language that much, but what we really mean when we talk about ending homelessness is to try to get to what we call functional zero. And that's a point when the homeless services system is really able to prevent homelessness as much as possible. And when it does occur, it's a rare and brief experience that occurs one time. So obviously a very different scenario than what we see today, where many folks become homeless. Maybe they find some shelter or housing and they might cycle in and out. And we don't have a system that has the capacity to fully address the needs of our homeless neighbors. If we were able to achieve functional zero, it's not that we would never see anyone becoming homeless, but it would be much less frequent, and it would be a very brief experience that we would be able to address very quickly. Next slide, please. So what do we need, or what really impacts our ability to achieve this functional zero state? We need to be able to house people who are currently experiencing homelessness, and that includes both housing and services that are needed to provide folks with the support that will help them to remain housed and address their health and mental health and other needs. And we need the resources and policies that will make these things possible, available, and sustainable. And then we need to address inflow. I think many of us are familiar with the stats on inflow. Despite the enormous growth in our capacity to house folks experiencing homelessness with the availability of Measure H funds, we've seen unprecedented inflow into homelessness. And that's what is contributing to the growth of our point in time count each year. Those numbers that LASA releases that get a lot of attention and show us that the homeless population does indeed continue to grow. So we need to be able to prevent folks from flowing into homelessness, and that involves a range of measures, including eviction prevention, rent control, different types of financial assistance and legal assistance, and bolstering our social safety net more broadly to prevent people from getting into a situation where they're unable to sustain their home. So the functional zero tool that we've developed really helps us to show the impact of both increasing exits to permanent housing and decreasing inflow, and how other variables, when adjusted, can impact our ability to end homelessness and how long it will take us to get there. So we can really use this tool to determine, which resources and what level of them is needed to move towards functional zero, and of course the policies that make those resources available. Next slide, please. So just kind of some background on what we currently see in our system. In LA County, we find that about 60% of folks who are homeless rely on the homeless services system to help them to exit homelessness into permanent housing. So what that means is that not everybody who becomes homeless requires assistance from a homeless service provider or our mainstream social service systems to get back on their feet. Many people, about 40%, are able to resolve their homelessness on their own. This is sort of a rough number based on the data that's available to us, and it's possible that that can change over time. But in our current system, we are able to permanently house about 21,000 people per year. That's what we were able to do last year. And so that means that if this formula of 40% of folks resolving their own homelessness is correct, that means that with about 35,000 people experiencing homelessness, that 60% of 21,000 is what we're able to house, and the rest would resolve themselves. So any inflow into homelessness that goes beyond that 35,000, unless we're able to increase our capacity to house people, what will happen is the homeless count will grow. That's sort of the current capacity of the system, and anything beyond that will lead to an increase in homelessness. Next slide, please. So just a little diagram to help understand what drives the tool that I'll show you in a moment. So we have our base population, and we add to that the annual inflow into homelessness. And we have folks who exit with the system's assistance, those who self-resolve, and then any additional exits that we could add. So if we received a significant amount of new funding to provide rental subsidies to 10,000 more people, and we're successfully able to use those rental subsidies, those would be the additional system exits. And when all of that kind of falls into place, we find what the following year's homeless count amounts to. Next slide, please. So this is just basically kind of the terms I went through in the diagram, and hopefully I'll have the slides afterwards, and this is all on our website, so we can just continue to move ahead. Okay, so this is how the tool looks. It's nothing fancy right now. So what if you follow this link to our website, you're able to go in and enter a projection for like what you anticipate next year's homeless count will be, and you can enter a variable for annual inflow, the number of exits that the system has the capacity to produce, the exits to permanent housing, and you can play with that self-resolved percentage. I said earlier that about 40% can resolve their own homelessness, and so you can adjust that. And then also add in those additional system exits. So if we add additional funding to support more people to be permanently housed. And what happens is the tool gives you a projection for how many years at that rate we would need to get to functional zero. So you can see as you sort of play around with it, how massive inflow into homelessness. For example, if we found that after the eviction moratoria expired, many more people were to flow into homelessness, you could see how that would affect our pathway to functional zero. Next slide, please. And this table just kind of shows you like the results you could get with different inputs. So if you kept if you use the tool, you would kind of derive these outcomes. So if we assume our base current homeless population remains the same, with different levels of inflow or different number of exits, you see you get these different results in the final column. So in one scenario, it could take us 32 years. Another, we would never get to functional zero if we kept our level of resources at what has been put in for that particular row, and so on. So really just kind of allowing you to play around with different scenarios. Next slide, please. So what's the point of this tool other than kind of for, interest's sake? I think it's most powerful as an advocacy tool, really to understand, what does the system need in order to really make meaningful progress towards functional zero. And it can't be, it's unlikely to be any one of the variables alone, right? So even though we can continue to invest in our housing system and the number of exits to permanent housing, and grow that, and that's critical. But if we don't address the inflow side, then that's going to not be effective in moving us along. We can kind of look at how the number of people self-resolving impacts the outcome, but it really kind of just shows that there are these two sides to the homeless count and the growth that we see in it, and that we need to make significant investments both in our prevention resources, in housing, rent stabilization, and other legal resources to prevent evictions, while also increasing the availability of funding for rental subsidies and the supply of affordable housing. And this tool gives us a sense of what the impact of these different investments could be, and allows us to share with stakeholders the way that these different variables work together. So happy to take feedback. This is a sort of new thing, and we're really interested in having a tool that can be useful to our partners going forward. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? If you do, use the raise hand function, and then I will give you a call on. All right, I'm not seeing anyone. So Elizabeth, let me ask you, the rollout of this, is it already happening, or what is the planned timeline for you to anticipate municipalities using it?
Yeah, it's already up on our website for you to use, and it's just a sort of initial rollout of the tool, and we're interested in your feedback and happy to make changes. I wish that I was able to provide a presentation today that actually said this is how we're going to get to functional zero, but hopefully this will be a tool that will help us to just conceptualize and advocate for the resources that we do need to move in that direction. So it's there. The URL is in the presentation. I can put it in the chat too before I jump off, so you can start playing around with it.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, Grace, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks, Liz. I'm actually on the website right now. So basically any of our cities can go in and put in their homeless count numbers and kind of figure out what the inflow versus outflow, or exits, and then kind of come up with their own scenarios to achieve functional zero, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a great use of it. Cities have their own homeless count numbers, so they can input those and also think about what resources in your community, whether it's increasing the availability of housing or providing additional prevention resources could help you on that pathway.
Great, thank you. I actually just put the link in the chat box.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beat you to it.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, hi Liz, looking forward to getting together with you later. So you're coming here, so you and I had chatted a little bit on email. So as I understand it, you have both ends of the pipe, coming in, coming out, and then you were saying it's 60% take care of themselves through the services, 40% take care of themselves through other means. What about the folks who don't take care of themselves? How does that fall into this, algorithm?
Yeah, so that kind of breakdown is for folks who do exit homelessness. So obviously, since we continue to see a significant number of people on streets, and not everybody is exiting. That's just including people who are able to find housing, and with some of them using like a resource from the system, whether it's a rental subsidy or some supportive services, and then others, maybe relying on friends or family, or just employment or whatever other tool they're able to find to pull themselves out of homelessness. And then, for others who are maybe not ready to exit, or are unable to get, they're not eligible for resources that are available, or there's insufficient resources, those are the folks that are not exiting.
Right, but that's not taken into account in the algorithm, right? I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, those are included in the homeless count, basically, that variable that says current homeless count. Anyone
Okay.
who's still homeless is in there. Yeah.
Right, okay, thanks.
Sure.
Janet, go ahead.
Hi, Elizabeth. Do you know if the county has any resources right now for rapid rehousing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a significant amount of our Measure H funding, as well as some of the funding related to COVID that is invested in rapid rehousing. As a part of the recovery plan for COVID, there's what we're calling recovery rehousing, which is basically similar to rapid rehousing, but for folks who are either in Project Room Key sites, or would have been eligible because of their medical vulnerability. They've been matched up to rental subsidies. So there is a lot of available resources. We need to continue to cultivate landlords who are willing to accept these subsidies, because that's one of the major challenges for folks who, are leaving our Project Room Key sites. They have a rental subsidy, but I know our service providers are working really hard to try to find places that will accept those rental subsidies.
Thanks.
Sure.
Elizabeth, let me ask you a couple more specific questions. So you didn't do a count this year, right? So people are looking at their previous numbers, and we've discussed at this meeting many times that the algorithm used is not necessarily spot on in terms of each jurisdiction's true numbers. My city this year, we did our own census, and it came out far lower than what our numbers were the year before through losses, point in time count. So the metrics that people would use to fill into the areas here, where are they really going to get those? And I guess my question would also extend to, what does LAHSA does the Homeless Initiative and or LAHSA think about allowing cities to do their individual own censuses as opposed to the traditional way we've been doing it, so that we actually have more daytime and nighttime numbers that we can really start to establish true metrics and also strategies that will work, and then be able to plug the aggregate information into this chart.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging issue, because LAHSA, who administers the homeless count, they have to follow the requirements of HUD, the Federal Housing and Urban Development Department. So that's what really drives a lot of how the homeless count is conducted. So, I mean, nothing prevents cities from doing their own census, but as far as what needs to be submitted to the federal government, that kind of is the methodology. There's always room for improvements, and I think that LAHSA works closely with its academic partners to continuously assess the way in which it conducts the homeless count. We do, for the purposes of Measure H funding, use administrative data as well to allocate some of the funding. And the way that works is, our county departments, like the Department of Public Social Services, Department of Health Services, Mental Health, and so on, they all have their own data systems that track people as being homeless. The definitions of homelessness vary, but when you use that count, you get a much higher number. And you also count folks who are maybe not the HUD definition of homeless. They might be sort of precariously housed or doubled up with others. So we do look at that data and use it in a formula to allocate some of the funding, just because it shows us a somewhat different picture of homelessness. I know some cities find that, you know, when they do their own count, their numbers are significantly higher. Others find that it's lower. Right now, you know, the point in time count at nighttime is sort of the tool that we have, but I think there is, you know, always an ongoing discussion about other methods or improving the current methodology and how that factors into the distribution of resources. As far as the, you know, the situation this year, because we don't have a PIT count for this year because of the pandemic, we will be relying on last year's numbers as well as that administrative data that I mentioned to allocate the funding. And that's just kind of what we have because of the impossibility of conducting the homeless count. But I definitely would, you know, urge you, if you have suggestions for alternative approaches to calculating homeless count across the county, to share that information. We are in our public comment period right now for the Measure H funding recommendations. So you can submit comments online as well as at our public hearing, which is taking place tomorrow, where you can provide a verbal comment. And I think it's important to hear from our stakeholders about the way the current methodology is impacting your ability to get the resources you need to address the issue in your community.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share with us.
Thank you.
All right. We are going to move on now to Anna from Bakersfield, talking about achieving functional zero and a case study from their perspective. So Anna.
Hi folks, my name is Anna Lavin. I'm the Executive Director for the Bakersfield-Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative. So we act as the COC for Bakersfield and Kern County. And I don't have a formal presentation, but I did want to share, I thought I'd just sort of walk through a little bit of the case study and, you know, really try to be a little more conversational and see what questions you might have. And then go from there, if you don't mind. So let me share my screen and so hopefully you can see where we have on our website a dedicated space to the Built for Zero work. If anybody can nod their head, just so that way. Okay, great. And so here we've listed the case study, blog posts, press releases, and some of the coverage around the functional zero success that we achieved for those who meet the definition of chronically homeless. And then here's the case. If you were to click on the case study, this is what you would find. So I know that we just had a discussion about functional zero and what that means. For us, functional zero is very similar. It's essentially that we've created for a subpopulation a situation where homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. So it doesn't mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot of sort of lay people in the group, if you will, but it doesn't mean that you don't ever have inflow. What it means is that you've created a system where you're highly responsive to the inflow that you do have. And for us, the way that we got there is really through 4 steps. But before I move forward, let me make sure that everyone knows what chronically homeless means. So in our community, when Community Solutions described us as having reached functional zero for chronically homeless, many interpreted that to mean that there were no more people experiencing homelessness, which is not what that means, right? So it means that is really we've achieved a systems approach and for a unique subpopulation. The subpopulation that we focused on was were those who are chronically homeless. So those who have both a documented disability and are known to have been homeless for at least 1 year. And so essentially we have some documentation, whether they've gone to a food pantry or been in an emergency shelter or had some type of connection point, essentially once a month for a 12-month period of time, or at least 12 months over a three-year period. So it's a very sort of technical definition and we decided to look at this group because we found in our community, and I suspect that's very similar in yours, that those who we're able to house are those who are easiest to house. And those who are chronically homeless, the longer they are experiencing homelessness and in combination with the disability, they're very difficult to house. And so, we would make quick work of a certain group, and then we'd have this lingering group that was just here, and you'd see them, quite regularly. And so our community decided that we really wanted to focus on that particular group and see if we could just get it done. And so for functional zero, there's a technical, the technical piece is essentially that in order to be able to say that you've reached that milestone, that you have 3 or fewer people on what we call a by name list at any time, because you're essentially being able to move people that quickly off of your list. And if I continue to scroll down, there are kind of 4 points that I think allowed us to get there. One of the things I would really emphasize is that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and I'm sure that many of the folks in the room will agree to that, but it really did take a concerted effort over a fairly long period of time before we sort of figured out like what works best for us locally. And so those 4 pieces really were first, making sure that you kind of have the right folks who are brought to the table. And we found that we needed 3 roles that were really critical to that. One is your admin lead. So you need the buy-in from the top. You also need a data lead. So someone who really understands and can provide a constant feedback loop of what's taking place and whether or not there was success in any of the changes that you attempt to make. And then the third is your boots on the ground. So the people who are doing the work, the people who are actually connecting with your clients or those who are unhoused. And then the next component that was really important that I'll talk a little bit about is the data. So you create something called a by name list that I'll mention in a few minutes. The next piece is the case conferencing. So again, that's where the buy-in is really important, because you need case conferencing that's really interdisciplinary in nature, and you have to commit to the idea that you're going to break down your silos. And then finally is really a public-private partnership, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a second. So as we look at where we started, I mentioned making sure that you get the right team together. And it really does require at least one champion, if not more, folks who are really committed to sort of this long haul work of creating a system where you have something called functional zero. The next piece, once you have that, and it took us a little while to get there, and over time, we've also been able to really create fantastic partnerships with our city and county folks as well. And that's really helped us improve things mightily too. That it's not just the homeless service providers who are engaged in this work, but really it's highly collaborative. But the next piece is, okay, well, who meets the definition of chronically homeless? And it took us almost a year to create the by name list that we were going to work off of. And that's where there's quite a bit of challenge sometimes because of the definition that we used, which is consistent both between Community Solutions and USICH, and the needed documentation component, which really meant that our data side had to be strong, and those who were working with clients had to really be invested in the documentation side as well. Once we had our by name list, and it took us about a year. So we started off with, well, just pulling from our HMIS system. We started off with like 300 to 400 folks. And the graph that you see in front of you is kind of the starting point where we had finally started to like get to a sense of about middle of that graph, get to a solid by name list. And so that's part of why you see all of this kind of weird irregularity, like where it's just up and down. Of course, you have inflow as you're whittling through your by name list. So that makes it additionally challenging, is to try to make sure that anybody else who's being added, meets the definition, and a whole host of other factors. And so there's a lot of variability there at the beginning. And then you can see that we started to make some progress, in about December of 2018, it starts to go down by 2019. And then last year we were making good progress, and then COVID hit. And we were actually ready to announce, and then we realized that because we didn't know what the implications of COVID were going to be, and it turned out for our community, probably like many, that there were a lot of negative impacts and a lot of increase in experiencing of homelessness as a result of COVID and the economic piece. So I'm glad that we didn't announce, because certainly from a public perspective, we didn't want folks to hear, oh, look, all this great work, and now all of a sudden our numbers are rising again. But this is what our graph looks like. And the other part that I would point out is that as we did the work, at first the work goes slowly, and then as we kind of built in a routine to it, the work starts to get faster and faster. And you can see that, I think, with the graph starting in middle of 2019 through to 2020, where things really moved pretty quickly for us. So I think I've talked a little bit about the by name list. I suspect with the kinds of scale that you're working with, that you may want to think about maybe a geographically based approach to a by name list, in addition to those who meet some of the other types of subpopulation groupings, like chronically homeless or families or something along those lines. Because as much as the point of the by name list is to pull together a group that you think has similar characteristics such that you can create an efficiency of use of resources in that way, really so much of the work is about knowing the individuals and what their unique needs are, so that you can really work through whatever their barriers are to finding a permanent housing solution. So the key data points, and I think I talked about this a little bit, and it was reviewed in the previous presentation, which is pretty similar, is that you're looking at your inflow, who are actively homeless, and then your outflow. And that's really where your data points lie. And that's what you look at on a monthly, if not weekly basis, to engage in this work. And that's where the use of technology really helps, is having an HMIS system, having your HMIS administrator be a participant, and playing a very active role in that. So once you have the by name list, then you move into case conferencing work. And really what that looks like is you don't work in silos. It's everyone gets into a room, and in our case, sometimes this is weekly, it was multiple times a week, certainly at least monthly, where you're literally deciding that you're going to work on everyone on that list. And what case conferencing really looks like for us is that the first half of the meeting is kind of a bitch and moan session, if you will. It's like, let's just get it out there. Let's talk about all of the things that are getting in the way and how frustrating that is. Okay, now we've had it out of our system. Then the next piece is the case conferencing, where we say, okay, all the things that we just complained about, we're going to problem solve around that. And the beauty of case conferencing, the way we did it, was that you're implementing constant change ideas. So hundreds of change ideas that you can implement immediately, you can test them out, and then essentially you can make a determination by the following week or in a couple of weeks about whether or not that change idea, that small change idea, worked enough that you might want to scale it up. So for example, you have a client who has 2 large dogs, right? And in your traditional method, you would say, okay, I want to help them, but I have all these other people that I'm trying to help. So it's really going to be hard to find a landlord that's going to work for this particular client. And so, you know, the case manager, not that they don't want to put some effort out, but it's highly likely that that effort may be diminished. In the case conferencing situation with the client with the 2 large dogs, then that's where you share out with the group, this is my challenge. And then, well, I might not have a landlord that works well with large pets, but over here, the mission might. And you're sharing that resource. Hey, I have a landlord who's very pet friendly. Let me help you make connections with that landlord. Other types of change ideas, and this is really where understanding the clients and the mentality and moving into the idea of we are going to focus on removing whatever the barrier is. Another example of that would be we found that some clients, because they have been experiencing homelessness for quite some time, they don't have a whole lot of sense of hope. And that diminishes their sense of motivation or willingness to apply for apartments because they have been told no so many times and they've been rejected so many times. And so the other change idea, for example, that worked well for us was, okay, well, what if is there a way in which we can remove the, or create a situation where the answer will absolutely be yes? And so what we tried out was that our housing authority took on a master lease of 2 units, because again, your change idea, you start off small. So they took on a master lease of 2 units with the idea that they would sublet, you know, they would sublease to the clients, essentially creating a situation where if the client applied, the answer would be yes, right? And within 4 days, the 2 units that they master leased were filled. And we found that that removed for some clients that a barrier of, I don't even want to apply because they're just going to tell me no. And so that was really exciting for us. So those are some change ideas that worked well and came out of case conferencing. There were many, though, that did not work so well. And those examples would include things like, okay, well, we have an awful lot of inspections that we need to do, sometimes of the same unit, depending on the different type of voucher. And is there a way for us to create a master inspection form that incorporates all of the different types of vouchers so that you only have to inspect a unit once and basically get all of your ground covered instead of having different folks having to go out at different times? And what we discovered was the answer was not really. The timeline doesn't work so well. The different types of criteria don't work so well. We weren't able to create like a master template form that would allow essentially a universal inspection that would check off all of the different types of vouchers. So there were definitely periods of time where our attempts didn't work, but you have to essentially decide that you're going to fail forward. That you're willing to constantly try different change ideas. And then that's the beauty of the case conferencing, is that while you are maximizing what you think of as sort of the consistent needs of a particular subpopulation, you are then also trying to create a situation where you still understand each individual client and what are their individual barriers and how can we move through to get them ultimately housed. And then I don't want to miss anything here. So let me take this off because I think you've gotten the point of this piece. So let me stop sharing here. And then finally, the other part that was really critical for us was the public-private partnership piece. And that came in 2 forms for us. One was that we received a Kaiser grant. And the Kaiser grant was incredibly flexible. So we also found that when clients did receive a voucher and it was basically go time, let's get you moved in, they would very regularly come up with one last reason why they couldn't move into that particular location. And we wanted to be able to like essentially remove all of that sort of psychological barrier stuff. So it'd be things like, okay, well, this space doesn't have a microwave. And so what was great about the Kaiser funds is that they were incredibly flexible. And so, you know, if a client were to say something like, okay, well, I can't go in there because it doesn't have a microwave that's red or whatever, then we could say, okay, fine, we're going to solve this problem. Here's the red microwave. Now you can move in. And that we could really kind of whittle away at some of the challenges that individual clients may have had, you know, or for example, you know, they have a birth certificate, but it's out of state. And so they don't have the funds to come up with the $40 fee to get the birth certificate. And so, you know, things like that for many of us may seem small, but ultimately felt like they were very monumental barriers to getting a housing solution and an outcome for that client. The other public-private partnership component, and this is featured in, if anybody's ever watched there was a documentary that came out fairly recently called The Way Home, and it's streamed on Amazon Prime as well as some other places, but Bakersfield is featured in episode 3, and it's 10 minutes. It's not a long commitment, but what's really great is that they feature and they showcase our landlord summit that we began here. And the landlord summit allowed us, one of the things that we started to realize, especially in the nonprofit world, is that the language we use is around sort of the touchy-feely humanity of working with people who are experiencing homelessness. And while that resonates for many landlords and property owners, what also needs to happen for landlords and property owners is an understanding of the bottom line and how working with us can work out, it can pencil out for them. And so we hosted a landlord summit in order to sort of bridge that divide, to start having us on the homeless service provider side be able to speak the language of the landlords and vice versa, and to provide some education. And what's featured in the documentary is that at the very end of the documentary, at the very end of the landlord summit, we have an ask. And again, using that sort of change idea model where we start small, our ask is not, can you commit 60 units, but can you commit 1 unit in the next 2 weeks to serve our clients? And that was a big ask, and we didn't know how they were going to respond. And all of the landlords had keys in front of them, like paper keys. And then at the front of the conference room is this big paper house. And the idea is you fill out the key with the location and your contact information, and you put it on the house. And let's see how many keys we can get for our clients, right? But it's a scary moment. And so you can see in the documentary that there's a sort of pause where we're like, okay, is anybody gonna actually commit? And what's beautiful is after a minute, you see people filling these paper keys out and they start walking up to the front. And we had, at the end of the first landlord summit, more than 60 units committed. And a lot of that had to do with us being able to talk with property owners and to say, you know, there's some benefits to working with us. We have a lot of risk mitigation that we can do for you that you wouldn't get out of a traditional landlord-tenant relationship. If there are challenges, we can create a situation where if they've signed off on a release of information, that the landlord can actually contact the case manager. And in a traditional landlord-tenant relationship, really, you don't have anybody to help you mediate through challenges that don't necessarily rise to like wanting to evict someone or getting someone out of there, but you don't really have any middle ground, right? And they really liked those pieces. Like, oh, I really would like to just keep somebody as a consistent tenant, but we've been having this issue and I haven't figured out how to solve it. And so that really has helped us a lot, is having those really trusting relationships that we've been able to develop with the landlords. And so we've hosted the Landlord Summit 3 times. Last year we hosted it during COVID, so it was very tricky to try to figure out how to have that sort of beautiful fill out the key, place it on a home moment. So our numbers went down a little bit with that, but the second Landlord Summit we had, over 80 units committed. So you can see we had some great progression, but for COVID, right, around this private public partnership piece of it. And that's really what we've been doing. And so once we were able to achieve functional zero for those who are chronically homeless, what we found is that this strategy really works well for us here locally, and that now we can start to shift to looking at other subpopulations with that same goal in mind. And we've been able to move on those at creating by name lists for other subpopulations much more quickly now that we have a sense of how to do it. And so we have a veterans by name list, we have a youth by name list. We were able to create within 6 weeks a COVID high risk group by name list, as well as a list of those who've actually contracted COVID and have had to recover, not knowing exactly what the health implications might be for them. And we were able to incorporate them into our coordinated entry prioritization process as well. And now we're starting to shift to families, which is the last subpopulation that USICH lists. And then our hope is, and we kind of use the PIT count, we did do a unsheltered PIT count using our HMIS system this year. And so our hope is ultimately to reach essentially an unsheltered by name list. And we think we're getting pretty close to being able to get there as well. Our challenge right now, frankly, is that we can have the most amazing data. We can have the most amazing case conferencing. Locally, though, we have a situation where we have 1% or lower vacancy rates. And in East Bakersfield, which is where most of our affordable housing, it was reported that there were 0 vacancies in the first quarter of this year. And so that's, for us, our sticking point, and I am sure we're not alone, is that if we ultimately don't have housing placements to place people, how do we get an outflow progression? And that's where we're trying to really focus hard on more of the home key dollars and some of these other pieces, and trying to think more about the types of housing that are appropriate for all of these subpopulations, because it's not a one size fits all solution. So that's kind of where we stand, but we're really excited about the work that we've been able to make so far. Obviously, there's a lot more work to be done, and we'll continue with that. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone may have around some of that work. And of course, there's the BKRHC website that has tons of information as well.
Great. Anna, but before you leave today, if you'll put the website in the chat box for anybody that wants to go and view it on their own. Are there any questions for Anna? Janet, go ahead.
Do you have data on what percentage of your homeless are mentally ill?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we were, I think, one of 7 COCs in California that did the PIT count this year. And so we used our HMIS system, and it showed, what was very interesting is in previous years for unsheltered, we've done face-to-face, send out hundreds of volunteers across 8,000 square miles. And our numbers from that, the percentage has typically been a lot lower than at least those in the field would expect. It was like 25, 30%, indicating some type of sort of mental illness. This year with HMIS, it was considerably higher. And I'm trying to remember what our report said, but it was something, I think, around 65%, which probably is a little bit more, frankly, accurate. And so for us, that was kind of intriguing. My thought process on why we might have that kind of a percent difference is sort of twofold. One is, you know, obviously, if you're asking for self-reported information, it depends on how you answer, it depends on who's asking. And so if you have this random volunteer that's asking you about, you know, complicated questions about your life, perhaps you're not going to be as forthcoming as you might be with a street outreach worker who is known to you, and you might trust a little bit more. So I have that suspicion. The other part is, again, has to do with our inflow and outflow. We have constant outflow, but it may be that those we are able to house are those who have fewer or less severe mental health types of conditions that are disruptive for them. But yes, we do have that in our HMIS system, but it's self-reported.
Christian, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I see my hand raised. Hi, Anna. First of all, what you're doing is wonderful. Second of all, I have a question and then kind of a sort of question. So the question is, as you engaged in this work, and I noticed, and I've been informed that, you know, community solutions played a role in this as well. And you know, could you inform us, you know, both as practitioners in this work and as growing sets of partnerships, what their value add was getting to both stand this up, you know, not take away from what your folks are doing at all, just trying to figure out what their value add is, and also the getting to yes part on both sides of things. That's the question. And then the sort of question is, the Caltrans, I deal with the homelessness in our district, which spans 2 counties, and I figured there's about 5,000 people in our right of way right now. And in our area, different district in your area, trying to figure out how best to, since we're not a social services agency or anything like that, you know, move this along towards where you already are. So anyway, that's sort of a question. Later, I'll contact you, but the question about community solutions is a question. So thank you.
They were really important to the work, for sure, and they acted as part cheerleader, which we just so needed, you know. I mean, you need somebody to keep pumping you up and keep going. And so they were definitely very much at the forefront of helping us craft, what does this even look like? How do we pull together a team? Who should be on the team? You know, starting to look at case conferencing in a different way and really owning the challenge that the client may be experiencing. And the other piece, and we were really grateful that we were funded. They have funding, I think, through Kaiser and some other folks. Now they have a lot of funding from a certain really large grant that they were just awarded. But they were able to fund us to go to national conferences that they hosted. And what was really great about that was being able to talk with other communities who were kind of walking the same walk, and being able to talk with those other communities about what they were doing and basically do amazing brainstorming sessions. So I would say that community solutions for us was absolutely a game changer. You know, it really helped us step up and move along in a direction that that we probably would not have, but for their support and assistance and their consulting.
Yeah, thanks. I'll follow up with you offline. Thank you so much.
Great. Elizabeth.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. That was really fascinating and amazing work that you guys are doing. I just wanted to share with the group a couple things that the county has done that kind of parallel what Anna spoke about, just in case folks aren't aware. One is Anna talked about the by name list that they have. Obviously, the county's really big, so it looks a little different here. But what we do have is what we call the 5% list, which is a list of the heaviest users of county services who are experiencing homelessness. So it really encompasses the very most vulnerable folks out there on the streets, and our county departments, once that list is generated by our chief information office, and kind of under the auspices of all the confidentiality restrictions that are in place, they're able to take the list of clients from their own department, and they aggressively pursue finding those folks and connecting them to resources to bring them inside, because we know those are the folks who are most vulnerable on the street and are in a sort of less humanitarian but economic way are the heaviest burden on county services. So it's not quite the same because it's on a somewhat different scale, but there has been an ongoing effort with that list. And then also kind of using our data, the Department of Health Services has a new prevention unit that is focused on using predictive analytics to identify folks who have touched our county systems who are most likely to become homeless, and they're going to be working to connect with those folks and provide them with the assistance they need to prevent them from becoming homeless. And it's a really exciting innovation with our partners from the California Policy Lab, having designed these predictive analytic tools. Might be a future presentation for one of your meetings to have those folks at DHS come in and talk about that work that they're doing. So just a little FYI for folks. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Anna? All right, and I see she's already put her email and the website in the chat room, and Roberto's put also a HUD document in there. So thank you very much for coming and sharing your story with us today. All right, we will move on. Courtney, you're up with the path update.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I take this off now. The staff have left. I'm at the office. Okay, so hi, I'm Courtney from PATH. We're People Assisting the Homeless, and I'm here today to talk about the efforts that the outreach team, the street-based intensive case management team, has done since the last time we met in March. So we can go over to the next slide. This is the team until Friday. Staffing update, John is leaving, as well as our program manager, Jasmine. They both ironically accepted positions up in Washington State. So Friday is their last day. We do have a staff in the onboarding process, and we are continuing to review resumes and schedule interviews. But until then, we're still continuing with the team of 3. And we're still out here doing the intensive street case management, meeting with our participants that we have on our caseloads, answering the LA HOP requests, as well as police department referrals and everything else in between. We can move on to the next slide. This is Andrew and Valerie, and they will be, well, up until this week, they were covering these cities. But once we, and you can go to the next slide, which is John and Stephanie. John has been with us the longest. John and I started on the same day back in 2018, so he'll be greatly missed. And so this team of 3, John, Stephanie, and Stephanie, Andrew, and Valerie will be the team moving forward until the next new hire comes on board in a few weeks, hopefully. And we will readjust the schedule to make sure we continue to hit all of our cities and answer the LA HOP request, as well as any police department request. Just a quick side note, we probably won't be able to, I know folks are used to us, going out the same day or the next day. That might be a little bit delayed now since we're a little bit short staffed, but we will get to the request as soon as we can. Next slide, please. Again, LA HOP request. Our outreach coordinator knows that we have that we're short staffed, so he will not give us as many requests. And so we are in communication with him, but please still submit LA HOP requests. There are other outreach teams out there that are answering them as well. Next slide, please. So these are March and April numbers. That actually should be 19 the requests that we've gotten since the last time we met. So we've gotten a few requests from, in El Segundo, we have actually a total of 5 from the past few months. And then 1 in Hawthorne, 3 in Carson, 3 in Torrance. And that's it for those, just to update those numbers. So we've received 19 LA Hop requests. Bye-bye. Next slide, please. So in the community, we are out here, we're doing joint outreaches with Harbor Interfaith, the CES lead for Spot 8. These are 2 main encampments, Lennox and Lomita and McCoy encampments. We hit those weekly, as well as the Redondo Beach meal programs at St. Andrews, St. James, and Shared Bread over at First United. We're also participating in Redondo Beach Homeless Court. We also collaborate closely with Hawthorne and Gardena PD and DMH, Department of Mental Health, and we make sure that we go to Wilmington, to the Doors of Hope and Beacon Light folks out there in the shelters to connect with those people as well. These are our numbers right now, thus far this year, with a team of 4. We do have a lot of referrals, tier 1 referrals in to try to link people to Project Room Keys, as well as the recovery rehousing program. So we do anticipate the permanent housing numbers to increase. We're just waiting for those referrals to, those folks to get matched to recovery. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is Miss Barbara. She was homeless for a very long time in Wilmington behind the Beacon Light mission. We were able to help her make it home, her and her cat Buddy here, you see in the corner, he's down there in the corner. She was able to make it home in April. This is through a direct placement, so she doesn't have a subsidy. She'll be paying her own rent off of her SSI income, and we were able to get her security deposit and first and last month and all that good stuff paid through the COG, and now she'll be maintaining her rent. She lives in one of the SROs in Wilmington, and we'll be providing retention case management to her. So we're very excited that she is no longer in the alley behind Beacon Light. On the next slide, we have Miss Rebecca. She made it home as well. She was actually matched through recovery, which is great. And she was also homeless in Wilmington for a very long time. And she made it home as well. And I believe she is also at an SRO in Wilmington. And that basket is what we give our participants when they first make it home. And she was really excited, as you can see. And it's always exciting when we have folks that sign their lease, make it home, and stay in their homes as well. I just want to, just before you go to the next slide, I shared a success story back in January. And just a quick update, it was a mother and the son. The mother passed away, Ms. Leachman, and I think that just highlights like the work that we do and why we like to get people connected to permanent housing, because these folks are on the streets, they are vulnerable. In her made it home picture, they actually had it in her obituary, which just like touched my heart. And she was really still, her son was still telling us how she was, very happy that, she was able to get permanent housing before she passed away. So we do deal with folks that are very vulnerable. So we really do like to get people off the streets. Streets are rough, and especially as people get older, they get more vulnerable. And then the pandemic, obviously didn't make anything, better for folks out there on the streets. And so we've lost a number of clients, but I know that I put her on as a success story. So I wanted to give you all an update on her. So we uplift her name and her memory. All right, this is the team out in the field, just a little, snap of what we do. And we're out there in the rain, even though we haven't had rain in forever in Los Angeles, but we're out there. John is down with the Knicks box. So he's the one that's gonna be leaving us. We're definitely gonna miss him. He was, as we onboarded new staff, he kind of took the lead as a team lead and really showed them, the way that, how we operate, the path standard. and the above and beyond and whatever it takes approach. So we're really going to miss him. And we are looking for staff that are, just as good as he was to continue that great work on the team. Again, I like a good pallet shelter plug. I would, continue to ask the cities to consider this. I know we're getting more and more online, but I think, even more cities could take these into consideration and just look at the existing cities that have them. And it seems to be working, especially in, out in Redondo Beach. And so it'd be really nice to be able to offer our participants who kind of don't want to leave the cities that they're kind of anchored in. It'll be great to be able to offer them this as opposed to, being on the streets. And I think that is it. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions, need anything. Yeah, here's my email address. It's better to email me. I do get a lot of phone calls. So email me.
Any questions, Courtney? Go ahead, Janet.
So Courtney, about how many veterans do you see, homeless veterans?
We actually don't see that many veterans on the streets. When we're engaging folks, when we do though, we do connect them to the appropriate teams. And I think like when we have, when folks see veterans on the streets, they do the LA Hop request that they put in there, then the outreach coordinator deploys a team that, supports veterans, that has those veteran services.
Oh, good. So the VA services are working. That's why I wanted to check. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I just want to say related to pallet, I just got an email last night that we moved our 14th individual out of pallet and into permanent supportive housing since December 28th. So I think we're averaging about one person every week and a half. So Courtney's right, the more cities that, can possibly do that in conjunction with, other strategies with their outreach navigators, it really does have the ability to make a difference. All right, so let me check our, Brianna, you're next.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to share my time with Sherry Weaver, our CES director, as well, to provide some other programmatic updates, but I will provide updates as it relates to the coordinated entry system and then some of the city-specific work that we are doing outside of interim housing, like the pallet shelter. Sherry will be providing those updates. So as it relates to recovery rehousing and recovery bridge housing, which has been mentioned a couple times on the call today, we do have a contract that has 30 slots. And so we've been able to house 19 of those 30 slots with pending applications. So we have about a 63% placement rate using those funds. So we really do appreciate the flexibility of those funds and being able to move people really quickly in collaboration with the Path Lease Up program. So that's been a wonderful collaboration for our team, and I know for other recovery rehousing programs throughout the county to quickly move folks into housing. So it's been great. With prevention, we continue to refer folks, eviction prevention, to legal services and some of the state, county, and local jurisdiction funds that are available to those who've been impacted by COVID-19 as it relates to their income and their ability to pay rent. So depending upon, we know the eviction moratorium is scheduled to sunset at the end of June. So depending upon that process, we'll see if that increases our phone calls. But as of late, we haven't received a ton, and typically we do with prevention. So I know folks are pretty aware of what's available at the state and local level. So just wanted to put that out there that we do get phone calls, but we are typically referring folks who've been impacted by COVID. And then some other programs, as I mentioned in the last meeting in March, we do have our new program in Torrance. We have an outreach housing navigator there, and she's been there since February 1st. So we are now in month 3, and she's got 2 folks placed into housing already, and she's working with some others at this point in time, and again, in collaboration with Path Lease Up to locate units for those individuals. We also have the Beach Cities outreach contract, which is with Manhattan, Hermosa, and Redondo Beach. It's a collaboration, and we're hosting a Homeless 101 training for the Beach Cities staff tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So we're excited about that. This is modeled very much after the COG's own training that many of you have probably seen and participated in. So this is a part of our work with the beach cities to ensure that that will be available, and we will also record it so that folks who cannot attend in person will have the ability to take the training. And then our team has also been partnering more recently with, we've always partnered with DMH, but I think we've made a pretty strategic effort to involve not only MET, but the DMH home team to work with some of our folks who can be more difficult to serve. So that, in collaboration with the local police departments, we've been able to navigate some of the tougher cases through the hospital system. So typically that's where we, see folks go. And so we want to make sure that they're getting the care and support that they need. And then just Courtney plugged it already, but LA Hop. Our outreach coordinator does a great job of staying on top of those tickets. If there's teams that typically, maybe have a staffing shortage one week, he knows that, so he can deploy it to a team that might not have a staffing shortage, that kind of thing. So he's very strategic in how he gets those tickets out and those requests out to the teams so that follow-up can happen within that 72-hour window that's dictated on the website. So we want to share that with folks. It's worked really well. It's a great way for our teams to be able to track requests as well, and see which ones require more follow-up or can be closed out, etc. So with that, I will just go over our goal attainment thus far, and then I'll pass it over to Sherry. So the CES goal attainment for all three systems, we have the families, youth, and adult system. We are the lead agency for all three systems in the South Bay and in SPA 8. So with that, for the adult system for contract year to date, which is July 1st through April 30th, the individual system has assessed 256 individuals or households. We've housed close to 36 individuals through rapid rehousing. That's not including the recovery rehousing numbers, with a retention rate at this point of about 90%. And the number of chronically homeless individuals that we've been able to place into permanent supportive housing thus far this year is 43 households. And we've assisted a couple of folks with prevention throughout the year, and all of them have been able to maintain their housing either on their own or with a referral to shallow subsidy. And the next population is the youth population. Again, July 1st through April 30th, we've assessed 38 new youth. 22 have been housed in SPA 8 through rapid rehousing with the 100% retention rate. And we haven't had any youth prevention referrals. That's pretty typical. But we have had 14 problem-solving conversations. So folks who might be in a precarious housing situation, helping them kind of figure out how to be in place, or is there a family member, kind of having those conversations with them to make sure that they do not enter the homeless services system. And then the family system, again, July 1st through April 30th, has assessed 303 families, has housed 137 families through rapid rehousing with a 95% retention rate, and they've assisted 10 families through prevention contract year to date. So with that, I'll pass it over to Sherry.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'll talk a little bit about our interim housing sites. To start off with, the San Pedro interim housing site, we currently have 2 vacancies. So we've been working really hard at our 2 sites here in San Pedro to really fill up our beds that we have since the pandemic and the subsequent quarantines. So we're happy to report that we're down to 2 vacancies, and we have 11 permanent housing placements at this particular site. San Pedro Bridge Home Site, we have 34 vacancies, and we're working diligently with our outreach teams. In fact, every Wednesday, we have a joint outreach that's specific to the catchment areas for this particular site. So we're getting them filled up. We have 13 permanent housing placements at that site. And then we have another seven residents who in the past month have secured employment. And then Christian, you stepped all over my report here. Redondo Beach Pallet Shelter. It's okay, you can do that, Christian. So as he mentioned, we've got 15 units. They continue to remain full, and we've actually got a standby waiting list. We've had 14 permanent housing placements since December. The team is on fire over there. I mean, just my hat's off to Lisa, Matt, Ramon, and Lila. They've got some secret ingredient. I'm not exactly sure what it is, other than they just don't quit. But one of the stories I want to lift up too is Michael Flowers, who was one of the residents who had been homeless in the streets of Redondo Beach for close to 30 years. And he just moved into a brand new permanent supportive housing project. And I think, you know, just having a conversation with him, both being excited and a little bit anxious about going into permanent housing, was a really neat conversation we had. He said, I'm going to be the first person there. I think that's a good thing, but I'm a little nervous. I'm sure other people will follow me. And then just having his reaction when he got there, which is, we're hearing more and more, is this all for me? And then, you know, just hearing those stories over and over again as we bring people off the streets, and, you know, especially somebody that's been out there for 3 decades is pretty amazing. And then one other thing I was going to lift up to in this report is just the increase in interim housing or even project room key sites. So in March of 2020, we literally had 40 shelter beds in CD15. We are now at 487 units, which is almost an 1,100% increase in what we had before. It's a good problem to have, but I think at the same time, it's starting to present a little bit of a challenge as far as filling all the beds. We've got ABH, San Pedro, and Wilmington, which each have 100 slots there. We've got 2 project room keys in San Pedro, Sunrise and Vagabond. Sunrise has 100 rooms, Vagabond has 72 rooms. And then we have a brand new tiny homes that's going to be opening up on May the 19th in Wilmington, which is right across from Harbor College. And that's going to be another 75 pallet shelter units there. And I didn't even include Redondo Beach, which of course adds to the inventory that we have here in SPA 8. So as I said, it's a good problem to have, but I think too, at the same time, strategically, we have to maybe rethink some of the catchment areas so we can cast the net a little broader, so we can keep these places filled. But that's my report. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
Great. I see Lori's got her hand up. Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, well, thank you all. Between Courtney, Brianna, and Sherry, I'm just like an emotional blubberhead over here. So thank you guys. Sherry, I'm just wondering, the fact that you, the pallet shelters, which I got to finally visit a couple of weeks and I was amazed, it was just spotless, just immaculate. That you have a waiting list there, yet you have openings at the Bridge Homes. Is it because of location and you can't move them there, or people really want the pallet shelter, that's much more appealing to them than the Bridge Home type interim housing?
No, our catchment area, for instance, for the county shelter, and the ABH has pretty much been San Pedro. ABH also takes into account Lomita and McCoy. We had hundreds of tents and encampments down here around the post office. We are down to 22. So, you know, just driving around, it's kind of like, you know, slim pickings, but I think these are people that are going to take a deeper dive engagement to get them to move. But, you know, as you know, Lori, we don't give up.
I know you don't.
So, I mean, it really, I mean, there is like a noticeable difference, even where community members are saying, what happened to all the folks down around the post office? And they haven't moved somewhere else. They're actually inside, which is an amazing thing. And they're getting permanently housed. So,
and that's good to hear, because I happen to live in San Pedro. So people come to me all the time and said, what happened to all the tents that were there over by the gulch? So I was like, I'm assuming they got housing or some type of transitional something. So the ones in Wilmington, what will be the catch area for who will be placed? I know 25 are for students at Harbor College. What
25 for students, and then the other 50 will be Lomita and McCoy. And even just from some of the data that we pulled on that, we're finding that we don't have enough homeless college students. So that may shift too, because that was the goal. So it's students, youth. So if we don't have enough to fill those 25 units, we will not leave them standing open waiting for somebody that fits that criteria. we will fill them up with other single adults.
Okay, makes sense. And that may change once the colleges start opening up their campus. Thank you very much for the work you do and for the updates. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Brianna and Sherry? All right, well, as always, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. All right, we're gonna move on to the LASA update, and that's Brittany. Brittany, are you there?
Hey, I'm here.
Okay.
One sec. All right. All right, yeah, I don't have any major updates, but we're still hiring. I don't know if I've mentioned that to you all, but we're looking for staff to represent you all in your spa. We're looking for staff for each spa, each of the 8 spas.
Okay. Anything else or?
No, I didn't have any requests for any other specific questions or updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Any general questions related to, go ahead, Grace.
Brittany, I was just wondering if you could share with everybody what your role is and how, as you're looking for people for each of the different spas, how that changes from what previously had been the community engagement, and what are some of the changes that, LASA has been doing in terms of that, and who our contact person will be, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the role will be pretty similar to that, but they'll be dealing with a few more stakeholders, and we sort of broaden that umbrella. So they'll be working directly with faith leaders. We'll be working with other community partners, depending on the community and sort of what the need looks like. But we'll be having one person in each spa. I don't know who the person is because I'm currently doing interviews. I'm doing like 3 or 4 a day. So I don't have a person picked out yet, but we're working on the interview, and I should be doing second rounds next week. And so they will be your point person, but you can always also reach out to me. And then in addition to each spa person, I'll have 2 supervisors and a manager in addition to those 8 spa people. And depending which stakeholder it is, for example, between my 2 supervisors, they may also have some stakeholders that they hold under their belt, maybe that are a little more broad than one spa, or maybe if it's like for example, for working with Kaiser or hospital system to do some community relations work there, they may take some of those relationships, but I'm in the process. And so I would say the other difference is I'll be working with Clementina. I know some of you guys already know her. She's now what is her new role? She's in charge of homeless count, but that is her role. So I know before she did a lot of other things, and now her primary role is to deal with homeless count, but she also deals with our lived experience. She's helping with that board. And so Clementina has transitioned into a new role. So that's changed, but she'll still be working directly with my staff as well to get homeless count done and to organize it, to find the locations, to make sure that each city has what it needs to. I know the count was mentioned earlier to carry out the count. But I will say the differences are that we'll be working with a few more stakeholders than we used to work with. The homeless count will kind of be what my team does, but Clementina will be managing the count. I don't know if there's any other specific questions because we've had some other changes as well. I know there's been some additions to our policy and ledge team as well. And some of those additions include liaisons that work directly with some of the cities. I know there's one person who works directly with council districts in LA, and then another person who works with some of the other.
I think Brittany may have frozen. Oh, wait, there she is.
No.
Oh, okay, you're back.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Grace, if that answers all of my internet connection says it's unstable. So I think I've cut in and out a few times, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question about changes or what the role is, but.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I just want to make sure that whenever you do get someone hired for Spa 8, that we get connected with them, that the COG gets connected with them.
Yeah,
so
that'll be one of our first priorities is getting them connected to the COG and the spa. And then we want to make sure also that they'll be sharing with you also information. So I know a lot of times cities and COGs and coalitions have questions about the specific data in their community. So they'll be sharing, we don't know exactly what the schedule will be like, but sharing some regular updates about changes to population size or population makeup, if we're seeing more families, for example. Some of that information they'll be able to share with you on a regular basis.
Great,
I'm
thank
not sure how much I did of that before because I'm also new to LASA. So just for background, anyone who doesn't know, I actually am an LA native, but I was doing the same job in New York City with the Department of Homeless Services and the Human Resources Administration. So I'm also new to LASA.
All right, any other questions for Brittany? All right, seeing none, thank you so much again for being here today. All right, our next speaker had to leave, but he didn't have an update. So we'll jump to the legislative update. Janet, anything on your end?
Interesting. I'm freezing today much more than I've ever have before. Must be my personality. Nothing major except that we received quite a few interesting community project funding requests, and we're excited to see how many we can get funded. As you know, one of them was the Torrance Homeless Response request for encampment infrastructure assistance. So fingers crossed, we're going to go to bat for as many as we can get. And hopefully I'll have more good news for you next month.
All right, very good. Thank you, Janet. Let's see, I saw Lily here from District 2. She may have signed off. And I know Jennifer Lamarque signed off. Okay, so I think that's it in terms of representatives for elected officials. All right, COG updates, Grace and Jackie.
We've just been really busy, as Christian knows for sure, visiting legislators to talk about some of the legislation that's going through Sacramento and how it's actually going to hurt cities and not help us get the kinds of things that we're looking for: more housing, more and to address the homeless crisis and the home crisis. So it's been a lot of work. We've been going to having a lot of meetings, and we're continuing that. Other than that, I don't know that there's much more to tell. We're getting ready for our May and June board meetings. At the May board meeting, we're going to have a presentation on the West Harbor project, which is in the redevelopment in San Pedro of ports of call area. And so that should be really interesting. And in June, I haven't confirmed this yet, but we're going to have speakers to talk about policing and police reform in Sacramento and what kinds of things are happening to change current law or practices in California. Grace, did you want to add anything?
Yep, I do have a few things. I did notice that George Gabriel had his hand up, so I don't know if that was back to anything we had talked about previously.
Yeah, I saw that. I was just going to let you guys finish before I went to George.
Oh. Okay.
Did you have anything else, Grace? Or
I did, and I know. Oh, you know what? And I see Moises Aglape is coming back on from Assembly Member Mike Gibson's office, so we just let him back in.
Okay.
But just briefly, and I don't know, is Ashley still on the call? Yes, she is. But coming up in July, the Board of Supervisors is going to be voting on the next round of funding for COGS. And so overall, the COGS in LA County are going to be receiving a portion of $15 million. This was the original $6 million that the COGS got, that we shared some of in the innovation funds. And then there was $9 million that was available previously for cities for implementation funds. So now that's combined to $15 million, and the COG, our COG, the South Bay Cities COG, stands to potentially get $1.9 million. And so we're going to be putting out, as soon as it's passed by the Board of Supervisors on July 6th, we'll be putting out a call for projects. And they're going to be in priority areas 1 and 2. So 1 is looking at, building the housing supply in LA County, and the other one is to enhance the LA County services. So kind of, they've been the same 2 priorities that both the city saw in the implementation funds and that the COG saw during the innovation funds. So I just wanted to kind of put the bug in your ear so all of our cities can start thinking about projects that they may want to be looking at, and we'll be sending out more information as it becomes available to us. And then the other thing I wanted to share is I'm hoping that our beach cities and Hawthorne and Inglewood all got an email. They should have received an email this week from the Homeless Initiative talking about bridge funding for their implementation funds to carry them through the end of the calendar year. So I just wanted to make sure that you all got that. If you didn't, please let me know.
City of Hawthorne received theirs. Thanks, Grace.
Okay, good. And I saw George put his thumb up, so we're good there. And then I see that Ashley just put into the chat box about the public hearing tomorrow. I know Liz mentioned it a little bit earlier. There is the public hearing for the Measure H funding. And also I think tomorrow is the last day that you can actually submit comments on the Measure H funding. So all you have to do is go to the, you can Google LA County Homeless Initiative, and I think on the very first page talks about the funding recommendations. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is, we have that client aid funding that's available. I've only had some verbal interest at this point from a couple of cities, Hawthorne and Torrance. So please, please reach out to us if you have some potential clients that are in need of the client aid funding. And if you want any more information about that, I can resend the information about that project. And I think that's it for my updates.
Great. All right, let's go to George.
Hi, thank you, everyone. My main question was when we were talking about legislative matters, I think some are well aware of Mike Bonin's proposal to house individuals at Dockweiler. I've been getting a lot of community questions about this. I don't know if this is going to be dealt with at the COG level or if it should be dealt with at the city level. But I've just been getting a lot of inquiries, and obviously it's still a proposal and it seems like it's still in its infancy right now, but it just may be something that, want to bring attention to the group about.
Yes, and I did forward over information about that a couple weeks ago to Jackie and Grace when it came across my desk. So Grace or Jackie, any input or updates on that?
I don't have any update at this point. Nope.
And
sorry.
I don't either. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks, George. Ashley.
Hey guys, I just want to piggyback on what Grace was reporting out, just to supplement. And sorry, I was a little late. Had hard time accessing the meeting. As Grace referenced, the public hearing is tomorrow, so you definitely have an option to submit comments via web, or you could also send comments via email as well. But the link that I sent includes the agenda as well as the call-in information. It's not a web meeting, so it's a telephonic meeting only. And then secondly, in regards to the $15 million that the CEO is recommending for the 18-month period that will begin on January of 2022, CEOHI had engaged the COG leaders, a couple of weeks ago to discuss what has worked well as part of the regional coordination innovation funding and cities implementation funding, so that we could really apply those lessons to be able to develop the funding framework for the second round of funding. And after the funding framework has been developed with COG's input, who represents the cities, we will be sharing that with the homeless board deputies And then as Grace referenced, we'll be working with the COGS afterwards in early July to really develop the planning process, how the cities will be engaged, and ultimately to finalize a statement of work, which would include the projects that will be selected and funded sometime in October, and the funding will start in January again. I think the cities have a very big role to play in this process, because we're certainly taking advantage of COGS leadership to really be able to shape the desired outcomes for the next round of funding. We're in a very different place compared to 3 years ago when we held our first city summit. So again, we really want to be able to continue enhancing, expanding. And for the second round, we want to make sure that every single city and the COG, and not just South Bay COG, every other COGs, to engage every single member city so that they also have a role to play. The third item that I did want to share with you, in case you guys are tracking board motions, is that on April 20th, the board adopted a motion directing the CEO to reevaluate the homeless strategies. It includes 3 components, and it also involves the cities and COGs. One is in consultation with the county departments, LASA, and various COGs and key homeless stakeholders, to report back after assessing the 51 homeless strategies with recommendations to improve or modify existing strategies to address the homeless crisis. So as part of that process, COGs will be engaged, and we certainly will take their lead on engaging the cities as well. And then the second component of that board directive was to incorporate a racial equity lens in terms of the funding allocation. And then lastly, there was a board amendment that was included in the board motion, CEO to include recommendations to increase cities' participation in each homeless initiative strategy and strengthen opportunities for cities to augment LA County's investment in interim and permanent housing solutions within their city boundaries for residents experiencing homelessness. So I wanted to share that with you, and we'll be discussing with COG what will be the most strategic way to engage the cities, because we're going to also need to hear directly from the cities as well. So I just wanted to put that, as a placeholder so you could start thinking about it. And we'll be meeting with the COGs in a couple weeks to discuss the funding framework as well as the process of engagement to develop the memo in response to the motion.
Great. Any questions for Ashley? All right, great. Ashley, thanks for sharing all that. That's music to my ears, I'll say that. So, okay, let's see. Then with that said, Moise from Assemblymember Gibson's office. I don't know if you can hear me, but we did a legislative update, and you had signed off at that point. I just wanted to see if there was anything you wanted to share from the Assemblymember's office. All right, hearing none, then folks, that will.
Actually, Christian, I got one thing, because I got a text from Jennifer.
Yes.
Marque. So she was gonna mention that public hearings are happening this month, with final budget deliberations next month. And she also sent me about addressing the homelessness crisis with 16.6 million in additional Measure H funding, for a total of 426.7 million to increase and sustain supply of interim housing and motel vouchers, streamline the bed reservation system for interim housing, and fund increased permanent supportive housing services, and 25 million infusion to keep affordable housing fund at $100 million level. So that was the report from Jennifer.
Okay, great. All right, then everyone, our next meeting is July 7th. So everybody stay safe. We're going into a new tier tomorrow, so don't get crazy on us. And And we will see you all possibly virtually, maybe not, I don't know, in July. So, all right, everyone be good.
Thanks,
for being here.
Kristen.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.